Hi, I'm Gabe Lyons. Welcome to another edition of our Q podcast. I hope your summer is going great. We're excited around here at Q. We just launched our new Q&A summer series, and I hope you got to participate in that over the last couple of weeks, that you've been able to watch that first conversation. For us, it was an opportunity, much like this podcast, to release a talk. But in this case, nobody had ever heard this talk unless you were actually at the Q conference. It was a talk on race and reparations in the church by Duke Kwan. And so for our evening together, we just had a great conversation, re-listening to the talk together. I stopped the talk a few times so I could ask Duke directly a few questions. We heard questions from you, our listeners. But all in all now, like a 45-minute session that you can go watch now. You can share it with your staff, with friends, with those who care about this discussion about how can Christians actually lead in what it looks like to repair some of the sins of our past as it relates to race. And so obviously that's a deep conversation. It's one you can't just jump in and out of. And so I think if you sat with us for 45 minutes and heard what we were able to discuss, and were able to discuss it with your spouse or maybe with your family or friends who are trying to work through what should this look like, I think you'll find it very hopeful, very positive, not just looking at the past and talking about everything that's been wrong, but actually hopefully looking towards the future and saying, here's what could be. And so check that out. You can go to qideas.org/summer series, and you can still see that. And in addition, early July is our next topic. So start planning for this. Every month in the summer, we'll actually have it live, and then you can watch the replay of it after the fact. But in mid-July, we'll be talking about the discussion around gender equality in the church, an important conversation about how men and women are working together, how we're thinking about this, about everything from the pay gap to what it looks like for women to really flourish within our churches, no matter what the theology might be of the church, whether that's women who are teaching and preaching or churches where theologically that's not the way they operate or believe it should operate. How can they also still empower women and empower women in leadership? So it's going to be a great conversation. Join us for that.
Welcome to the Q podcast.
Q is about conversation.
If we're really concerned about ending poverty, we've got to be more concerned about creating justice.
Our cultural products as Christians need to both defy and resonate with the culture.
And God's doing amazing things. His church is expanding, his church is growing.
It's not what's the purpose of my life, it's what is the purpose that's been assigned.
Stay curious, think well, advance good. This is Q.
Well, today we have a strong leader, a woman who's going to be delivering the talk that you're about to hear. Her name is Isom. You maybe have heard of her. She's one of the All-American soccer goalkeepers. She was one of the first females who trained with and actually tried out for an SEC men's football team as a kicker. So those of you like me, I played football. We never had a woman try out for football when I was in high school. But now that changed because she was the first to do that for an SEC team. But she's kind of widely recognized not only as an athlete who had great success, specifically as the soccer goalkeeper, but also as somebody who's just a rising voice for her generation. She's in her 20s. Isom is somebody who has been so honest and transparent about her own struggle with pornography and her own journey towards finding healing. And it's out of that healing that she's talking so honestly about topics that many times in the church are not discussed, whether they make people uncomfortable when we talk about sex or when we talk about porn or we talk about attractions or sex within marriage. There's all these conversations that sometimes just never get discussed. And yet Mo has been willing to go there in her book. She most recently wrote a book called Sex, Jesus, and the Conversations the Church Forgot. I want you to listen with me now as we listen to Isom deliver a wonderful talk on how we can think better about sexuality, pornography, and God's design for human relationships.
More so than anything, I am invigorated to be with you all because there is a part of me that just wants right now in this time, in this culture, where we are in the world, I just want to stand up and I want to release a battle cry. I just want to stand on a mountaintop and let the Lion of Judah just roar out of me. And God so deeply desires to be the Lion of Judah that roars out of you, reclaiming his truth, his promises, his goodness, his instruction, his never failing, never changing, never forsaking, life-giving word to the world. We bear a responsibility as women of God to not shrink back, but to step up and to rise up for the sake of generations to come. And where I find this topic stirring in me so much, because right now it is like the biggest thematic issue and conversation in our culture, is around sex. It's around sex, and it's around sexuality, and it's around brokenness, and it's around sexual sin, and it's around all things that the world has stolen. This beautiful gift given to us by God, this act of worship, this weapon against the enemy. And the world has stolen it, twisted it, cheapened it, perverted it, worshiped it, and suffered the consequences. And we have a responsibility as women of God to rise up and reclaim sex for the glory of God. And the world is suffering right now. The world is struggling. It's like this loud shouting match, this great worldly debate. And they're looking occasionally at the church. Do you have anything for us? Any answer, any insight, anything to help here? For a moment, they're going to glance at the church and look for answers. And when they look, we're a little silent. We're like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I don't even know how to address that. This is so big. This is so messy. That's not my place. And oftentimes, if we're being really honest, ladies, I think we're silenced by our own shame. We so often carry sexual testimonies that might look different for every woman in this room, but the enemy is so keen to use our sexual sin to silence us into shame on a topic that God cares fiercely about. And that was so my story. I am not standing up here as a preacher. I am standing up here as a pilgrim who learned every hard lesson, every hard way, whose life was one of misguidance and misbehavior and rebellion and then repentance and this roller coaster ride of sexual struggle because I didn't understand sex in its entirety and the church wasn't having those conversations with me like they should. And so I struggled with, we won't do a show of hands, but in your heart, raise a hand. There's one woman in the back like, it's going to be me. But I struggled with the virginity vow we make, and we actually know nothing of purity. And so we push the envelope over and over and over again in the darkness. But we're still a virgin, right? We're puffed up and prettied on the outside. And I made the virginity vow. I was exposed to pornography at 8, wrestled with an addiction to pornography until 18. I was promiscuous, lost my father to suicide, and my great response was to find any sin-sized piece I could to fill the God-sized hole in my heart that hurt. Gave pieces of myself away to anyone who would give me some worth, some value. I was an adulteress without even realizing it, involved with a married man because I was drunk in college and didn't care. Oh, but I was still a virgin. I was the woman who came to know redemption, but then still struggled when temptation entered back in. Check all the boxes for sexual brokenness, and that was my story. But guess what? That's not my identity. Because I know a Jesus and I know a word of God that speaks boldly and practically and constantly about sex. The first conversation God ever had with man wove together our identity as humans in sexual instruction. Our worth, our value as image-bearing creations of God with sexual instruction that was beautiful. I know a Jesus who stood with the Samaritan woman at the well, and in the face of her filth, he drummed up her sexual sin. In the face of her filth, he stayed. He offered her living water that she would never thirst again. And his great love, his great mercy compelled her into evangelism. I know a Jesus who looked at the adulteress to be stoned, and when the world wanted to tear her down for the reputation that preceded her, he said, if you have no sin, cast the first stone, and they all had to walk away. And I know a Jesus who said, I don't condemn you either. In response to my great love and mercy for you, go and sin no more. I know a God who uses Rahab the prostitute in the lineage of Jesus Christ. I know a Jesus who looks at our sexual stories and says, I'm not finished with you yet. I am a God of redemption. I am a God of love. I am a God of hope. I am a God of healing. It is my deepest desire to reclaim wholeness in your life. And then, girls, stand up on that mountaintop and roar like the Lion of Judah. Because healing's coming and revival's coming, and I make all things new. We are living in this time where sexual sin is so rampant. I'm not the only woman in this room who struggled with pornography. You guys, in 2016 alone, in one calendar year, on one pornographic website, there's hundreds of thousands. On one website in 1 year, we as a people consumed 4.6 billion hours of pornography. That is 524,000 years of pornography, 17,000 complete lifetimes on one website in 1 year as a people, and then we came back for more. I can't tell you the number of women I hear from who reach out, who share all of this sexual struggle and baggage, whose testimonies are so similar to mine, and they reach out saying, I didn't even know we could talk about this. This has been so shamed in my life. I've stayed so silent. I didn't know what God had to say. I thought he was one of wrath, anger. He couldn't use me. He doesn't desire to see me. It's too much. And I said, no, sister. He desires to use all for his glory. So boast in your weakness and point to the glory of the cross. There is grace that he desires to pour out. There is redemption that he desires to pulse through. There is healing that he will raise you up with. But you guys, in response to a Me Too culture, we must say, then me first. Me first. Create in me a clean heart, oh God. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. God, whatever sexual baggage I carry let me hand it to you. I'll go first. Lord, whatever lack of forgiveness I'm giving, whatever's been done to me that's still binding me down, that I'm bitter about, God, let me hand it to you. I'll go first. If I want to shift a culture, if we want to shift generations for our children, if we don't want the world to still be a Me Too culture when our kids are coming up, then we must say, then me first. I'm not going to be silenced by shame anymore. I'm going to say, here it is, God, have it, take it. Take it. Work in me right now. Do a holy and hard heart work in me. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Correct what I've misunderstood. Bring me as a wandering rebel back home. Pour out your love and your mercy and your grace and your healing. And then I'll go first and stand up and say, wait a second. I will reclaim sex for the glory of God, and I will begin speaking to my children about it, and I will begin working in my marriage on it with my husband. I will begin understanding the fullness of it. I will begin equipping myself with the ability to have the heart conversations with others about it. I won't be silent anymore in a world that wants to silence me. I won't be silent anymore for an enemy that's keeping me hush. No, I will stand up boldly and say, I know the truth. I know the living water. This is hard, this was messy, but it's available for you too. So me first. And ladies, would we stand up and would we roar and reclaim the gifts of God as good and holy? And I believe we'll see healing and redemption and revival in our generation. Thank you guys so much for letting me come share.
I told you that Mo would bring a powerful talk. I hope you felt that as you just listened to her confidence, her boldness, her willingness to just call out a few things that we need to do better at, that we need to be thinking about around these conversations. And it's not only for our kids, it's for us as adults. As you think about others in your life who maybe are struggling with some of these questions, they're not super aware of what they believe about some of these things, and specifically don't know who they could talk to about these conversations around sex, I would highly recommend that you forward them, share this podcast with them, have them listen to it. Let this conversation be a starter for you to have a conversation with somebody about these difficult topics. Maybe it's your spouse that you'd like to listen to it. Maybe it's somebody who you know has gone through a past where pornography has brought a lot of shame into their life and they're not quite sure how to release that, how to move forward, what their worthiness is. as they move forward in their relationships, whether it's in marriage or just in friendships. But share this. Let this be a tool to equip somebody, to encourage somebody today. That's our goal here at Q. We want to engage some of those difficult conversations, some of the ones that are just hard to bring up and it's hard to know how to talk about them. But we believe if we just stay curious about these things, if we learn to think well, and then we go out and we actually do things with this, that's what changes the world. And so I hope you'll continue to follow this podcast. Invite others to listen in throughout the summer, throughout this year. Every episode, we're bringing you a talk that we believe is timely, is critical, has been thought through really well, and will actually encourage and help you, but all within the span of 20 minutes. So I hope this has been encouraging to you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to our next episode.